So 1 year ago, I had 1/4 of a ton of parsnips in my bedroom. It created quite an interesting aroma to live with. Stacked as high as I was and snaking through my room, it created a kind of narrow corridor between my bed and my desk. I began to feel like some kind of vegetable minotaur. What was I doing here? We'd heard about the parsnips through chef Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall, and all of them were going to waste. The farmer was going out of business through a combination of rock-bottom prices and bearing the cost of this horrendous waste. And a bunch of Hare Krishnas were about to pick up the parsnips from my house. What on earth was going on? It all started in a bookshop. I'd been getting into environmentalism. I'd always been into environmentalism. When I was 9, I got bullied for believing in climate change. Now I started going to protests. I played the ukulele in front of lines of police. I chanted, I held placards, and all the rest. But as I read more about the problems in the world, I began to feel overwhelmed. What could I, as one individual, do to change all of this? I began to feel like I was spreading myself too thin. I needed a cause to attach to. So I was working in this bookshop, and I was sitting in the staff room leafing through damaged stock. These were books that were maybe a bit scuffed, and so we as staff were allowed to keep. As I was flicking through the chick lit and the Christmas books, I came across this book by Tristram Stewart. And as I was leafing through the pages, I came across a page of pictures, and my jaw dropped. And what I saw was a picture very similar to this. And basically, this is a field of oranges, which were all going to waste. I remember feeling this gut feeling of disgust at this image, at this obvious injustice in a world where so many people are going hungry. Maybe you feel it too. The stats are astounding. So an estimated 1/3 of the food in the world is wasted. That's enough to feed 3 billion people, including the 1 billion people approximately going hungry in the world right now, and the extra 2 billion people expected on the planet by 2050. If food waste were a country, it would be the 3rd largest emitter of greenhouse gases after the US and China. And all of the water that is used to grow food that is wasted would be enough for the household water needs of 9 billion people. This left me shocked. About a week after reading this book, I headed down to Trafalgar Square, where Tristram and a bunch of other amazing organizations were organizing an event called Feeding the 5,000. They were feeding 5,000 people out of food that would have been wasted. Women stuffed their handbags full of potatoes out of a wooden skip. The homeless munched apples at Charing Cross Station, and there was a festive cheer. Out of that event grew the organization that Tristram founded, and I'm proud to be a member of now, Feedback. And we have lots of projects which aim to reduce food waste, but they're all motivated by this. This is kind of like our manifesto for food waste, and it's like a reduce, reuse, recycle. So it says that first of all, what we want to do is design food waste out of the system in the first place. Then if we can't do that, we want to redistribute it to people in need. If we can't do that, we want to feed it to livestock, and then we want to compost it and turn it into energy, and only landfill as a last resort. So back to the parsnips. This was the farm that the parsnips in my bedroom came from. This whole truckload of parsnips was going to waste, along with 24 other truckloads. These bananas were going to waste as well, just for being slightly the wrong size and shape. Farmers often don't want to waste this food. They're caught between lots of different influences, between the weather, between consumer demand, but perhaps most importantly, supermarket policies. For instance, these cauliflowers, and many like them, are often ploughed back into the field by farmers. Why? Because farmers often overproduce for fear that if they are ever short one year, then they might get struck off by one of their buyers. But that means that in a good year, they have to plough a huge amount back in as the price has crashed so low. And we met one farmer who was wasting 250,000 cauliflower for this reason. You might have heard of wonky fruit and veg. This is basically where a supermarket rejects fruit and vegetables for being the wrong size or shape. So we stand with this apple in calling for rights for wonky fruit and veg. Because beauty comes in all shapes and sizes. You might be a knobbly pear, a two-pronged carrot, a curvy cucumber, but you've got to work that. You've got to embrace your wonkiness, because wonky isn't ugly. Wonky is charismatic. We've got to help these vegetables fulfill their dream of becoming real fruit and veg. Now, supermarkets will often try and blame this on consumer fussiness, and that's undoubtedly a part of the problem. But supermarkets have often cultivated this fussiness. You won't see the same uniformity in a farmer's market, for instance. Also, supermarkets sometimes use wonkiness as an excuse to reject an order when they don't want produce anymore or they've found a better deal elsewhere. This one farm was wasting 1 in 4 of their carrots just because they were the wrong size, shape, or had blemishes. If you think about your 5 a day of fruit and veg that you're meant to have, to put this in perspective, this one farm was wasting, on average, 21 million of those portions per year of carrots. But many of the things that were rejected, you probably wouldn't even recognize as wonky. So, for instance, these potatoes have tiny surface blemishes on them, but they would have been rejected too. I spoke to one farmer who said that his apples were rejected if they had slightly too low a percentage of red on their skin, or whether they were just a couple of millimeters too small. So we've got to embrace wonky fruit and veg in all of their variety. So back in 2011, not many people were talking about the colossal food waste on farms. So we set out to change that by getting out in the fields, by setting up the Gleaning Network. Gleaning is basically gathering up the leftovers after harvest. It's an idea that's both old and new. So it was mentioned in the Bible as long ago as that, and it was also widespread in the Middle Ages, where poor peasants would be allowed onto farms to gather up the leftovers to survive, as depicted in this painting by Millet in 1857. But by the 21st century, gleaning had all but died out in the UK. So 5 years ago, we set out to revive it in style. In the modern version of gleaning, we take volunteers out to farms to save those colossal amounts of food waste that I was talking about earlier, and save it for charity by harvesting it. It's a great day out in the fields, and it's a great chance to connect with where your food comes from. The farmers love it because they've spent all of this time and effort growing food and love to see it going to a good cause. It's a good chance to talk to the farmer, to see this huge amount of food wasted firsthand, and maybe pick up your own wonky fruit and veg, like this giant cabbage, which we nicknamed Big Bertha. So we take usually groups of 10 to 20 people down to the farm, but sometimes we've brought groups as large as 50 out, and it could be even more. It's a great social day out, so you can chat while you're gleaning, and it's a great chance to make new friends. Then at the end of the day, we redistribute it to charities like FareShare and FoodCycle. So this gets it to people in need from a huge range of organisations, so like homeless hostels, women's refuges from domestic violence, drug rehabilitation centres, and many others. And at a time when food poverty is on the rise in the UK, and we actually have 8.4 million people in the country at the moment struggling to put food on the table, that's the equivalent of the entire population of London, this is a lifeline. It's really satisfying knowing that you've saved this food with your own two hands. And in the last few years since we've been running, we've saved over 3 million portions of fruit and vegetables from going to waste. But ultimately, what we want to try and do is design ourselves out of a job. We want to reduce this food waste and stop it from happening in the first place so we don't have to pick it. We've been doing this by raising awareness about the cause of food waste. We've been in The Guardian, in The Independent, on BBC Radio 4, and recently we've had big-name celebrity chefs come along. So, for instance, Jamie Oliver joined us last year, and he described gleaning as a bit like a lock-in at a pub, except with more onions. Here we are with Chef Hugh Fearnley-Whittingstall handing out some of the parsnips outside Morrison's. And we're beginning to see change. So in the last year or so, we've seen all of the major supermarkets, bar one, launch wonky fruit and veg ranges. But these are only beginning to tackle the problem. And what we want to do is push it even further. We've also been spreading gleaning throughout Europe, so it's really catching on. It's spread to Belgium, to Greece, to Spain, and here are our companions in France through the medium of their Lego alter egos. I promise they do really exist. Some of the food that we glean goes to our partners on the From Farm to Fork project, FoodCycle. FoodCycle are an amazing organisation who cook up food that would have been wasted, and they take kitchens and cooking spaces, cook it up, and serve it to people at risk of food poverty and social isolation. So why not join us in the fields with gleaning and then come along to the kitchens and see where the food is going to? When we're not out in the fields, we're partying with events like Disco Soup. Disco Soup is like Ready, Steady, Cook with DJs. So we take a bunch of food that would have been wasted, we chop it up, we cook it, and then we commonly eat it to music and dance. Here is one of our DJs from a previous event, partying at the V&A Museum in London in front of an ancient artwork. And here is our bike-powered smoothie maker and disco dancing carrot and banana. To fuel the party, and I must stress this is if you're over 18, we've developed an ale called Toast. And basically, this is a beer made from bread that would have been wasted. 1 slice per bottle. All proceeds from this go to raise money for our charitable work. So there's loads to get involved in. If you'd like to get involved in gleaning or any of the projects and food waste campaigns that I mentioned here today, then please go to feedbackglobal.org/gleaning. You'll also find that in your lunch boxes today, you've got yourself each your very own gleaned apple, which has been saved from a local farm, and also a leaflet with more details of how you can sign up to get involved in our events. So please tell all your friends about gleaning, whether they be human or potato. So thank you very much for your time, and you'll be pleased to know that the parsnips in my bedroom did eventually get picked up by the Hare Krishnas, and they were cooked and served for free in the streets of London. So thank you, and I hope you'll all join us in the field soon.